You're listening to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.
And welcome to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community. Once again, I am your host, Ben Wolf. We are going to learn from our guest today how to address and solve major issues like dividing or changing the equity situation between partners, and what skill really makes all the difference between long-term success and failure for small and mid-sized businesses who are trying to scale. With that, I would remind everybody to subscribe, leave a review, and by doing so, obviously you make the content here and the information that we are sharing more accessible to yourself in the future, as well as with all the fancy algorithms on these platforms, more accessible to others as well. And with that, I do want to get into introducing our guest today. Very excited to have him. I read his book, given it a lot of thought, and it's really a classic in the entrepreneurial space. So our guest today is the Dean of the Syms School of Business at Yeshiva University. He was previously a professor at Harvard Business School for 13 years and a professor at the University of Southern California. He holds a PhD and an MBA from Harvard Business School in leadership and macroeconomics. He's the author of The Founder's Dilemmas, Anticipating and Avoiding the Pitfalls That Can Sink a Startup. And I'm going to put a link on Amazon where you can get that book in the description and in the social media posts. He's also the author of Life is a Startup, What Founders Can Teach Us About Making Choices and Managing Change, from just 2 years ago. And you could also find out more about our guest by searching for his name in the search box at yu.edu. That's Yeshiva University, yu.edu. And with that, I give you Dr. Noam Wasserman. Welcome, Dr. Wasserman.
Okay, thank you so much, Ben. Thank you for reaching out.
No problem. And, it is an honor for me to have you on the show. Like I said, I read the book, and I mean, it's a classic, and it's, I definitely felt more like reading one of the Jim Collins books than a lot of other business books, because of obviously the academic background and the data that you were bringing to bear. I guess that one theme that I saw in that book, and obviously you've written and done a lot of scholarship since then as well, but one theme that I saw there, and that I think that I was hoping we could focus on today, is this theme that I guess obviously came out of a lot of your data and research, that dealing with hard stuff, like the skill of how to deal with hard stuff, really makes the difference between success and failure. I guess I was hoping that we could kind of focus the conversation around that theme, and to get into specifics. I also wanted to start with talking about what you've found, especially now with like COVID and lockdown and reopening and ever-changing rules and regulations and statuses constantly changing and sometimes changing back. What actionable lessons that you've seen that you take away from what's going on in business, that really business owners and entrepreneurs should be taking away from what's going on?
So lots of things, very big topic. We can go and see in some ways a more extreme version of what is the typical set of founding challenges that we might be going and facing. One of the things that I've been focusing on for the last few years is very much around entrepreneurial mindset, not just that the key decisions in the path, what are the things you have to go and decide, and then which are the bad ones, which are the good ones, but far more even beyond for people who've never thought about founding, people who will never have founder on their business card. What are the ways in which they can take the entrepreneurial mindset and apply it to lots of walks of life? And that's something that right now, I think that mindset is a key thing for a lot of people to be going and applying, whether they are in a startup, whether they are not. In terms of the entrepreneurial mindset, a lot of times we go and what we aspire to is that when we hit a bump in the road, when we go and hit a problem that we didn't anticipate, that we can still go and persist. The usual system, the usual person, usual challenge that we face, when we hit a bump in the road, it's fragile. It comes crashing down. And what we instead try to go, and we celebrate it within entrepreneurship, the persistence of the founder. We try to go and have a bump in the road be that we can continue without having things come crashing down for us. In some ways right now with COVID, the real test for us is going even beyond that, going to another step beyond it, that we can go and see how we can get stronger possibly from those bumps in the road. This is something that I saw echoes of in a lot of the things that I've been learning for decades now when it comes to the Judaic side of the things that I go and learn. But there's also a lot of modern thinking around entrepreneurship that has echoes, reinvention, if you will, of some of those things. So just to go back a couple millennia, we can go and see in the Talmud where it talks about that mindset. In the Talmud, they call it Gum Zulu Toba. They call it, this is also going to be for the best, where when you hit a bump in the road, how can you go and seize the day? How can you go and take that and be able to go and have it become something that will make you stronger? So for instance, one way that one of my students went and captured that, there's a paper back 7 or 8 years ago that I saw a line in this paper and just stared at it for about 10 minutes and then printed it out and put it up on my wall. And it's become in some ways a way that it converts the ancient into the current. That line was that it's really easy to get stuck in a rut, especially if you're good at what you do. And that student was talking about when she was going and was on autopilot, she was going down a path, and it took a shock from the outside that at first set her reeling, that essentially it was like a real shock to the system. It looked like a negative of development that went and had her go and rethink that being on autopilot. Had her go and actually think about a different path where there might be a more rewarding way to go rather than just going and continuing on autopilot, to go and take a look, put up the periscope, look across the landscape and realize that there's a more rewarding way in life that I should be going and approaching things. So it sparked her going back to school. So it sparked her heading into a very different path that she might want to go through. And in some ways, it very much embodied to me the Gum Zulu Toba. This is also going to be for the best. Because when we go and have that externality that went and shocked us out of what we were doing, if we go and just recoil from it, but we don't turn it into something productive, then it's not going to be a way in which we're going and thinking in a different way, thinking about a different path, thinking about a different type of impact that we can go and make it. In modern terms, there's an author, people have read The Black Swan. They're very much know that concept, that book. We are facing right now a black swan in terms of like a very rare occurrence that is going and affecting the world, but it's actually his follow-up book, Talib's follow-up book to that I find actually captures this ancient concept in a really nice way. That book was called Antifragile. And we already talked a little bit about how the fragile system comes crashing down. The persistent, the neutral system can continue. Antifragile is a system that gets stronger from the bumps in the road. It has a way in which it's been designed to actually get stronger from it. We can go and see in a lot of ways, very topical right now, about our bodies and how we get stronger from what should be a setback. One thing that we were going and seeing even before COVID was when you go and work out. Now, the human body was designed to be able to get stronger from ripping our muscles. When we go and work out, we are going and tearing our muscles. Why would we go and do that? Right. Because it was designed to be anti-fragile, to get stronger from it. When we go and take a vaccine, what all of us are hoping is around the corner right now. But when we go and see what we are going and doing when we inject ourselves with a vaccine, we are going and assaulting our immune system. We are putting disease into it. Why are we doing that? Right. Because God created our bodies to be anti-fragile when it comes to the immune system. You have to go and get stronger from it. And so if we can go and take the entrepreneurial mindset of seeing that shock, how can we go and get stronger from it? How can we go and be able to see a new way of doing things, a new path for ourselves, some maybe self-awareness that we develop better because of this, that we can go and take these last 3 months and be able to go and get stronger from it. That's where entrepreneurially we'll be able to go and bring the ancient Gum Zulu Toba approach to being able to go and do that since then. And so I've talked to a whole bunch of founders and a bunch of other people within the university. We've also experienced a bit of this. How do we go and get stronger from these setbacks, and a bunch of new initiatives we put in place that wouldn't exist if not for the fact that we had to think differently about this summer, about the ways in which we're going and educating the students, other things like that. And there's a bunch of founders who have gone and pivoted in a similar way to go and see very much a different way to go and do some things. You got the most prominent of those was Zoom, being able to go and see how they were going from corporate conferencing into being able to go and do education and being able to do like instituting several new features, going and battening down the hatches when it came to security stuff, other things along those lines. They had a bit of a pivot in terms of the way that they went and took a core product, but tuned it for a new application that wasn't a very big part of their application before. There's a founder I was on the line with today that's doing AI, and they're finding all sorts of new verticals in which they are needing to go and have AI be applied. They just signed their biggest contract in May with a new client to be able to go and head into a brand new vertical that wouldn't have existed if not for COVID. And so
Right.
there are all these ways in which we have to go and step back. Yes, take that natural recoil that we go and have, but then turn it into added energy, turn it into new reflection that we can have about a new way that we can go and be thinking about the old ways that we were doing things.
Right. Well, I mean, you gave that analogy of the body being anti-fragile. I was not familiar with that term, but the body being anti-fragile. But you mentioned your business having an anti-fragile system so that it gets stronger from the bumps in the road. What does that mean what does that mean to have an anti-fragile system in a business? How
Well,
do
in
you make that? What does that
So
mean?
in some ways, it requires a little bit of a cultural change at the level of the business. But being able to go, a lot of businesses are on autopilot instead of having a continuous improvement approach.
Hmm.
Instead, we should go and be using times like this to go and say, what are the things that we're doing that are succeeding? Can we go and build them some feedback loops, be able to go and tune into those? But then what are the feedback loops telling us about what's not going so well? And be able to go and see, how do we take what we're doing right now and improve it? How do we go and do the equivalent of what I usually think of as start, stop, keep analyses? What are things that are going well that we should keep doing? What are the things
Hmm.
that we're not doing right now that we should start doing? And what are the painful things that are going on that we should stop doing? And that's a mindset shift that has to go on within businesses, where you can go and use that to go and tune into where we go and have some things that should continue, but a lot of other things that if we actively go and search out the ways that start and stop might be applied to them, then we can go and find new ways that we can go and be a lot more fine-tuned for the next stage, and then build that into our ethos, build that into our psyche about, now that we took our best cut at a pivot, what is the way that we can keep tuning into, continuing to go through it. In a lot of ways, this is a similar kind of thing. Lean startup is saying, go and find your biggest uncertainties, go and set up your biggest tests, and then very actively act on that feedback. Going and building in that kind of a mindset into every part of our business operations, of diagnosing what's working and what isn't being done and should be started. That's something that very much as businesses we should be building into our cultures much more than when we were on autopilot before.
Right. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's about being more intentional about, like you said, what should we stop? What should we start? What should we keep? And being much more intentional about that. I mean, people on this show have heard me talk about the entrepreneurial operating system, EOS. Obviously, any company that is using that to manage themselves is going every quarter and just kind of getting outside the business, not just going, but stepping outside the business every quarter for a full day off site and working on looking back at the previous quarter, what worked, what didn't work, looking at the long-term goals again, and then resetting course every single quarter for where you want to be going, every week looking at data and measurables, whether things are on track or off track, and immediately getting into it.
Yeah, and going even more
SWOT
extreme.
analysis. What?
Yeah, going even more extreme than that, going and inviting in maybe some audiences that you usually wouldn't be going and including within
Like
that
what?
kind of a cycle. So for
Like
instance,
what?
at Yeshiva University, back in the fall, we started doing this even before COVID, but it became even more critical when COVID had hit. We started
Mhm.
building in what we call mid-semester feedback. Go and ask the students
The
what is
students.
going well in the class, find at least one thing that can go and be improved, that then the faculty are able to go and act on during the second half of the semester. And that goes and builds in a new kind of input, a new kind of way that you can go and be able to
Mhm.
see that the continuous improvement cycle can be in the middle of a semester rather than waiting for the end of the semester, asking the students for feedback. And the students will go and benefit from it at that point. The future generations will, but not those students. It also
Right.
doesn't give the faculty, they're going to be teaching that course again a year later. No, let's go and have it be the next day after the faculty get feedback that they can go and act on it. Figure
Mhm.
out which of your other outside parties might not be part of your process yet to be able to go and be able to do that quarterly planning you were just talking about. And we're having some pointed involvement of them might be able to go and accelerate your learning also.
Right. I appreciate that. I really would like to go into this more too, but we wouldn't get to the other stuff I was hoping to cover, which is one thing is from, it's from 10 years ago, the Founder's Dilemmas book. I learned a lot, you analyzed a lot of data. If you had to boil it down, I mean, you kind of previewed this a minute ago, but if you had to kind of boil it down, what are a couple of the main, the main sticking points or decision points that make the biggest difference that you've found between businesses that ultimately make it and scale and just succeed, whatever that means, and those that don't? What are some of the biggest themes or differentiators between them? I mean,
Good.
just
So
pick one or two. Obviously, it's huge, and there's 100 things you could say, but Pick one or two.
Absolutely. Let's go and boil the ocean in the next 15 minutes.
Yeah, no problem. It's
Well,
easy.
the overarching one is the one that motivated me to even become, to focus on this and become an academic in some ways. That to me was a surprise. I remember when I was a founder, very naturally that you would go and be focusing on two major things. You'd be going and focusing on the product or the service that you were going and developing. And you'd be worrying about the resources. How am I going to be able to go and get the financial resources or other things like that that I need to be able to go and bring that product or service to life and then be able to go and build an organization around it. I ran into some research that was published now more than 30 years ago that went and highlighted inadvertently and in a very backhanded way, like in a very small way, but it was fundamental to me, how that's missing a big piece of what separates the success from failure that you were just talking about. That with all of our attention that we put on product and finance, when you take a look at what separates the companies that are able to go and realize their potential versus the ones that fail, the biggest difference is actually the people issues. It's not product, it's not finance. It is the team dynamics. It is the tensions or frictions between the founders themselves or between them and the other people who come on board. 65% of the reasons for failure are actually the things that we as founders don't focus on enough, are the things that are going to be the interpersonal or the intrapersonal. And that's what the biggest thing is that I've found in terms of what I've focused on for the last 20 years of mapping out what are the early ways that founders go and cause people problems for themselves by who they're going to involve in the venture, how they're going to go and involve them, because those are the things that if we can go and reduce that 65% slice of the pie, then we're going to be able to go and really move the needle on the success or failure of our founders. Let's go and take the biggest slice of the pie and make even a small dent in that. And we can have a tremendous amount compared to if we take a small piece of the pie and go and make even a big thing in that. So that's where it's the biggest part of it, of appreciating the people side, appreciating the interpersonal and the intrapersonal as the critical things that go and separate that. And then within that, what that leads to is understanding ourselves, our biases, the ways in which we go and mismake those people decisions. When it comes to, for instance, we go and deny the pitfalls. We got into a bunch of the things around the fragile ways that we go and set things up for ourselves. If we go and deny that we're going to hit a bump in the road, then it's going to be even more devastating when we go and hit it because we haven't planned around having some kind of way that we're going to be able to act on it when we go and hit that bump in the road.
So one people issue you're saying is being overly optimistic and not taking into account the obstacles that will inevitably get in our way.
Exactly. And the problem is that the founder's psyche is to go and tell ourselves, I'm thinking conservatively, I'm going and not being over optimistic. And yet we go on a recurring basis. Passion gets us, overconfidence gets us, and it goes and has us discount all the ways in which things might go wrong. We go and focus on when we conquer the world, rather than going and looking at, let's go and aspire to that. Let's also go and look at what are the things that recurringly could bring the best of the ideas down. And instead, let's go and plan around those a little bit while also reaching for the stars.
So what are the kind of interpersonal issues? That's maybe more intrapersonal, but what about more interpersonal issues are the biggest culprits, I guess, of the downfall, or at least eventually. I'm sure sometimes it's a slow death, but.
So in terms of the interpersonal part of it, one of them is the very natural human inclination that almost all of us have to go and avoid difficult discussions. If it is a conflict-ridden thing that we are going to have to go and deal with, let's go and push it off. Let's go and try to hope that the little elephant in the room isn't going to grow into the big elephant in the room because we're not going and discussing it. And those are the things that go and set us up for the worst of the things to happen at the worst times, because we could have headed it off at the pass. And instead, we've waited until it's going to be trampling everything else. And so on the interpersonal, it's that avoidance of tension, the avoidance of conflict that leads to our not doing the difficult conversations that we need to.
All right. Well, what are some of there's different angles to approach this, but like, what are some of the most common elephants?
So the most common happened to map to what my research showed were the biggest things that bring those founding teams down when it comes to interpersonal. Call those the 3 R's. The first of the R's is the relationships that you have. Are you going and founding with your best friend? Are you going, which happens to be founding with friends and family is the most common of the ways that founding teams come together. And so are you going to go and avoid the conversation about how is our relationship, the prior relationship, going to lead us to have all sorts of ways when the business and the personal is going to come into conflict with each other, how it's going to harm are being able to go and do what's best for the business, and in the same way, be able to go and end up with losing both the business and the personal. So the first of the R's is the relationships one. Second one is roles and decision making. How are we going to be able to go and decide who is doing what roles within the venture?
Right.
Oftentimes you have everyone wanting to be in charge. You have all sorts of ways in which you're going to also set up with the conflict avoidance part of it, that we're going to make decisions by consensus together. One founder, one vote. Everyone has to be on board with it, or we don't go forward with it. That's a recipe for tensions also within the venture. And so there's all sorts of ways in which figuring out the right titles, and especially when you have so let's get into a drip before we get to the third of the R's, which is I think the one that you want to go most deeply into. There's also a relationship between those first two R's. You go and have the best friend that you found with, what's going to be most likely in terms of how you go and decide to make decisions. We're going to be equals. We're going to be the equivalent of co-CEOs.
Egalitarian, I think was the term you used in the book.
Exactly. And that is a recipe for all sorts of ways in which you're going to have destructive ways that you are going to be 1-1 on all decisions that you want to make. Even if you disagree on 1% of decisions, you're constantly making decisions together. You're going to have all sorts of tensions that if you're not going and setting up, especially if you're a two-founder team, how are you going to go and break that 1-1 tie on a critical thing that comes up almost every day? You're going to have that kind of a divergence with it. Are you going to be able to go and discuss with your best friend who you are not going to be able to go and deal with very tense business decisions together with, how you're not going to be able to go and do a lot more of a setting up for success when it comes to the decisions, for the roles and decision making and things like that.
Right.
And so
if one of them, if the role that, to the extent that you have a role, if the role that he has or she has or you have, you're not really right for, or you discover later on that you're not really right for, and because of that relationship, and if you didn't actually proactively address how this stuff would be decided later on, and like how do you tell your best friend or your wife if you go into business, or your husband, like, hey, you're really good at this, but you're really not good at that. So we need to move you out of that and into something else.
Yeah, and you're getting into another one of the elements of when you're going and founding with the people that are close to you socially. A lot of things that go and attract us to people socially are the similarities that we have with them. A lot of times it's going to be the backgrounds that we're bringing, might even be the schools you went to together, the ways in which you view the world. It's a lot more common that you have, for instance, two techies coming together to found together, two business people coming together to found together. And then when you go and see, because we have, this compatibility, this thing that makes us comfortable, we're birds of a feather flocking together. Well, that also means that when it comes to the roles, you're both going to be wanting, if you're two techies, to be going and making the shot, calling the shot
or whatever. Yeah.
And in academia, we call that homophily. Homophily tends to be great when you're looking at who you're going to bring together socially, but it happens to be the death knell for founding teams. When you have two techies and no business person, or vice versa, you're stepping on each other.
Two people that are good at sales, but nobody knows technology.
Exactly. And because of that, your homophily is going to lead to more tension rather than lower tension, because you're both wanting to go and make those decisions. And it's also going to leave gaping holes in your team. When you're looking at the checklist of all the things we have to go and do well, you're going to have double check boxes when it comes to what the both of you do well. And you're going to have a big unchecked box when it comes to the missing hole. And you're going to be going and doing it thinking that what could be better than doing it with someone I'm already compatible with. The problem is the compatibility leads to a whole bunch of risks being heightened rather than reducing tensions within the team.
And before we get to the third R, what's the most common place to find someone who will be compatible, or not just compatible, but complementary?
So this is, when you're talking about complementary, I assume you mean complementarily different.
Yeah, right. That's what I mean. Not just compatible, but complementary. That someone who will be at least statistically more commonly, better to work with, more effective to work with, I should say.
No, so this is where you're getting into the art of creating a founding team, because you need to be similar in the right ways and different in the right ways. And so similarity, I think, is a little bit what you were talking about with the complementarity, that working style, and maybe even when it comes to risk propensity and values and things like that, that you want to be relatively speaking on the same page, even though there is a little bit of a yin and yang, a tug and a pull that you're going to have when it comes to those things. But you want to be different when it comes to skills, when it comes to the backgrounds you're bringing to it. And that's a lot of the challenge of being able to go and have those things coming together. In terms of being able to go and find that, a lot of the best ways to be able to go and do that is to have had some kind of substantive way that you've been working on some project with this person, whether it's that you're going and finding a coworker from a different division of what you were going and working in before, but where you had a project together, where you were bringing the sales side to it and they were bringing the technical side to it, being able to go and find ways that you've been able to go and date each other, to be able to go and see our styles are similar enough, even though our backgrounds are different enough. Being able to go and not get married right from the beginning, but go and take a small piece of being able to work together substantively and being able to go and do that together, even if it's not from prior work life together. When you have a potentially a co-founder that you found, go and find some project, a small project that'll be a substantive benefit to the venture. Go and have the other person appreciate why they have to go and date you in addition to your dating them. You really want to get to know each other before you go and commit to quitting your day jobs and being able to go and found this together. Let's go and work together on a small project first. At the end of it, let's go and evaluate whether we should go and continue. Let's go and set an endpoint to it. And we should go and have the default be that we're not going to go and continue. And that way you have an easier conversation of being able to go and say, yeah, it was great to go and do this project, but I think that there's enough flaws in what we were going and doing. It also sets up a little bit of the continuous improvement mindset. Let's go and have feedback on each other as teammates, be able to go and give each other feedback on start, stop, keep. If we're going to be going forward as founders, we've gone and surfaced what are the biggest challenges, and we've gone and hopefully found solutions to it. And in this way, you're able to go and build it into the fabric. You're building the difficult conversation muscles together. As you're going into it, either you gain a lot of information that's valuable from someone you could have worked together with that you wouldn't have had otherwise, but now you're saying I should go and find someone else, or you've gone and jump-started this great duo that is going to be able to go and have a very easier way to go and have these difficult conversations together once you go and found together. So those are some of the best ways to be able to go and get past that hurdle. Okay, and
that's
then,
great. Yeah, the third R, maybe, and we're kind of getting out of time, unfortunately. I mean, I would love to just extend, but I have to respect your time also. So yeah, the third R, maybe what's that one?
Okay, so we have the relationships, you have the roles and decision making, and the third R is the rewards. Dominantly the financial rewards. How are we going to be able to go and just like we had allocating the roles and decision making within the team, how are you going to be able to go and allocate the rewards? There's some intangible rewards that are key, but also the financial rewards, the tangible ones. How are we going to go and allocate that? And a lot of times the most important of those, and this is what the research shows also very much, is make or break for a lot of founding teams, is the discussion around ownership that you were referring to before. The way in which we're going to be able to go and allocate the ownership within the team. A lot of times those Achilles heels that we talked about before get in the way of being able to go and do it well. The avoidance of the difficult conversation. This conversation is one that every founder is not looking forward to going and having, is very much going and trying to avoid that elephant in the room, is trying to go and not be able to tackle this in a very substantive, deep way. And that means that they're going to go and punt on it, that they're going to go and try to satisfy us with something that they think is an okay solution. The most common of those is often the 50-50 split, the 1/n rule that people try to go and do. And what a bunch of the research has shown is that the quick and easy handshake comes back to bite you. The way in which you don't go and discuss it, the way in which you just go and say the best we can go and guess at right now is the 1/n rule, a third if there are three of us, 1/2 if it's two of us and we're just going 50-50, that happens to be the most ill-fated in terms of the team, its ability to even raise money later on. You get a major discount if you go and do the quick and easy handshake. There's all sorts of ways in which it's also a signal that this team can't deal with the elephants in the room well together. If you can't even go and negotiate together over this, how well are you going to be able to go and negotiate your first critical customer contract? How well are you going to be able to go and negotiate with that investor who's going to be coming on board to go and be able to infuse money into your venture for a certain percentage of it in some control terms? It's very much an indication possibly of immaturity or a particular inability to go and deal with difficult conversations. If you can't even go and do it with your co-founder for life, how are you going to be able to go and do it with people who are not going to be as aligned with you as you're going and trying to create those contracts and other agreements across the rest of the life cycle of the venture? And so that's the third of the R's in terms of the rewards. And it's a great echo and microcosm of those things that we were talking about, with the 65% that fail because of the people, the tensions, the inability to deal with difficult conversations, and also the rosy view of the world. Let's go and assume we're going to conquer the world.
Nothing will go wrong.
Exactly. We're all going to be fully committed to this venture. We're all going to be able to go and continue scaling with it well in the role that we went and picked out and things like that. And so you're not going and looking at, well, what happens if one of us actually has to drop out? What if one of us is not going in scaling? That's going to have fundamental implications for if that equity split is going to be a positive force within the company or whether it's going to go and heighten the tensions.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about a scenario of two people going in 50-50, let's say, and one of them is just not pulling their weight, and then, but now they're stuck and they're kind of doing some other job full time, barely giving enough attention to it. And yet now they're stuck with the situation. I mean, you got to buy them out. Like, what are you going to, what are you going to do? I mean, you just renegotiate. So maybe just like really, really fast, what's like the main tool that people use to, I guess, to make a better decision, or to deal with the issue and make the equity situation with their partner or partners in a way that's going to be more effective and less likely to lead to catastrophic results?
Well, and several things that those are pretty actionable things that I've seen founder after founder be able to go and benefit from, but it all goes and is countering those deep biases that we have to go and force ourselves to get past it.
Right.
One of them is to go, well, so the difficult discussions, one of them, but even before that, go and force yourself to think about the risks that you face. Go and force yourself to come up with at least 5 major risks that you're going to be going and facing. And those are usually going to have some implications for the team. It's usually going to be, if you have a risk that maybe we're not hitting the market, well, we might have to go and pivot in a way that's going to make one of us obsolete. It's going to make our skills, the person who was our B2C wizard, well, it might be that the risk is that we're actually going to have to pivot to B2B. Now that person who was the critical person within the company now is holding a big chunk of equity, and now it actually turns out that they're not the key player within the company. And so force yourself to come up with some risks that also sometimes leads to a bunch of difficult conversations. If the risk is that your good friend who is the B2C person or the B2B person is in this pivot going to become obsolete, well, that might be a difficult conversation to go and put on that person. Or if some of it might be around the commitment side, we know that you are going to become a new father when we are founding, and we're not sure that you are going to be willing to go and make the same sacrifices in terms of the amount of time, in terms of the other things like that, very deservedly, that you should be going and focusing on your family instead. Well, going and having that conversation with your best friend is going to be something that's going to be very sensitive to be able to go and key that up. Or even if you're single still, we know you really like your day job. Are you sure you're really going to come on board and quit your day job to come and be able to be part of this company? Or things along those lines that are very sensitive.
If revenue takes us slower than we're hoping, to grow, and what are you going to do? What would you do?
Exactly. If you have all sorts of financial commitments and we're going to have to scale back our paychecks because the revenue isn't where it is, or there's going to be a delay in our raising that round of financing that we all very confidently are assuming is going to be right there. Well, one of us might have to go and step back for the venture. Who's going to be that person? Or if we're going to have to go and scale back in terms of the salary, who is going to be the one who's going to be most affected by that and is going to be resisting it? So a bunch of those things that are going to be going, if you can go and force yourself to think about the risk, is going to tee up a lot of those difficult conversations. But doing it well is what's going to set you up to being able to go together and being able to go and deal with the unexpected and the ways it's going to be the bumps in the road, where you're going to be able to go and hopefully make it into a Gum Zulu Toba because you've gone and built those muscles earlier in the small way before the real challenges are going to be coming later on down the road.
Right. No, I appreciate it. And look, that's obviously, a lot of people who are listening to this are going to be in businesses where they've been around a while, and it's not, they're not like brand new startups, but they may have partners, and they, may still be dealing with this issue on one extent or another. And, the sooner people can deal with these tough questions. I mean, I get what you're saying in general, that dealing with tough questions and dealing with tough issues, it's indicative of a much deeper skill that makes a difference between success and failure. Not only because of the outside things, fundraising, let's say later on or whatever, but it just in so many ways can just bubble up and make things untenable if you don't have the ability to deal with the tough things.
Yeah, no, and unfortunately, when it comes to the people issues, it's particularly hard to go and hit the undo key. A lot of other decisions that we make where you can go and reverse them, you can go and be able to adjust and things like that.
It just costs money.
Exactly. And you can go and raise the resources. When it comes to setting an expectation with someone that they're going to be an equal partner, And now go and hit the undo key, reset that social expectation, or several of the other things that we've talked about where
it's just poisoned.
Yeah, exactly. And when you go, how easy is it going to be for you to recover from a loss of trust? That's going to be really hard to go and hit the undo key on that piece of it. And so all of these things are where it's far better. This goes back to my engineering background. When I started off in the world, I was an engineer. It's far easier to go and design the system well with foresight to begin with than to take a flawed system and try to undo some of those flaws. And so that's where having the foresight about the road ahead, the foresight about your own biases, if you can go and be able to get a lot more of that knowledge of what is coming up, what are the difficult forks in the road I'm going to face, what are the trade-offs that I'm denying that I'm going to be going and facing, and then you can go and do a lot of more of that planning early on to be able to go and take that into account. That's where it's going to be much better for the team and for you.
Right. I appreciate it, and I definitely appreciate all of your time today and everything that you've shared with us, Dr. Wasserman. And yeah, I just appreciate you coming on. We got the Founders Dilemmas link in the description and the social media, and really appreciate you coming on and joining us and everything you shared today, and how to deal with these tough situations, and all the importance of just forcing yourself to deal with it and building that muscle, getting in that habit. So thank you.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for asking, Ben. Thank you for the great questions, and best of luck with all of your variety of projects that you're working on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And everybody else, we'll see you on the other side. Thank you.
You're listening to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.